Steve's not around, so I got to blame someone. All right. Let's go ahead and get started here. So, hello everybody. Welcome to the second lug for the month of goodness gracious. This is August. Um, who would have thought that we would got this far in the year without the world ending? So we are going to talk about some Linux hot takes tonight. We'll just go around of people who, if you have an unpopular opinion, like it doesn't have to be a popular unpopular opinion, but if you like, say for example, hate Arch or dislike Vim for the passion for any reason at all, that those type of things. The if you and whatever, be as creative as you want. We'll go around and get started here. Um, these usually take a little while to get going on the live stream, so there's nobody in the chat yet, but eventually someone will come and troll us, I'm sure. So welcome live users to the Linux user group. If you want to join, the link will be in the Discord, and then there's a link in the description below. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. So, I will go first. My first Linux hot take is that there is a weirdness in the Linux community that people are very zealotry about in terms of actually using open source software. And there's these people, and everybody knows them, that if you use a proprietary software, they will literally hate your guts. So like I use Vivaldi, and it is not open source, and everyone lets me know it constantly. Like every time I do a video and it shows Vivaldi in the video, like, excuse me, Matt, you know that that's not open source, right? Why are you using that? You say you're an open source evangelist, so why are you using this? And yeah, so that's mine. People need to calm down and just use whatever the hell they want. So, RBM, you're first. Go ahead.
Hey, everybody. Hope my mic sounds okay again.
Yep.
Um, so I'm just going to come swinging right out of the gate. Arch Linux is great as a project distro. It is not for running your laptop or your desktop PC off of. It's a project distro. It's baby's first, like command line, get familiar zone for people who aren't ready to take the plunge into Gentoo or LFS, because those are, again, mainly project distros. I mean, if you run them as your daily driver, more power to you. Like, mad respect, honestly. I couldn't do it. It's way too much work. But they're project distros, and they should be treated as such, and they should not be recommended to users who are looking for a distro to use, not a distro to maintain. And I don't understand why it's an unpopular opinion, but I certainly know that the opposite opinion is extremely popular. So I guess I'll kick it off with that one.
Okay, so if anybody wants to respond to that, go and raise your hand, and we'll come back around to it. Don't be afraid to move on, but we can always circle back around because I'm sure someone's going to reply to that. Storm, go ahead.
Goddamn, RVM flying in with a good point, and my point actually kind of extends on this because this isn't necessarily an unpopular opinion to like general users, but it is to some developers. There is a problem. Linus Torvald himself pointed this out of overdevelopment for fucking development's sake, thinking you're a smart ass, making simple shit really, really hard to do. I love tinkering with my OS, and I should be able to still do that, but a general user should not have to go through the monotonies of terminal, and other stuff like that to use an operating system that is not a replacement for Windows or Mac. Both me, who likes to use the terminal, and someone who likes to use the operating system needs to have a flow and function with the system where it's not breaking their user accessibility. And Linux has gotten somewhat better in this, but every desktop environment seems to still have this problem where it is still highly overdeveloped in areas where it doesn't need to be and underdeveloped in areas where it needs to be. And this kind of chauvinistic fixation on lines of code, thinking you're some like hotshot, is killing the Linux operating system in a lot of ways and slowing us down. We need to get past this hurdle.
So what you're saying is that Linux needs to be more suckless. That's what I heard. Okay. All right.
I feel that we need to be a lot more dynamic about how we work things without trying to use this bullshit argument that, oh, well, I love tinkering with the terminal. So do I. You can still do that on on like any good distro. Like they need to be able to do a balance of both without tripping over themselves.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna say Henry, but I really want to say it in a French accent, so you go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm gonna apologize right off the bat. English is not my first language, so um, but actually, my like it's a very unpopular opinion that Linux is still in 2024 too complicated for newcomers. Because like trying to like tell my father what Linux is and how to get started on it, there's too much stuff you have to learn to even like understand it. Like trying to explain to someone that Linux itself isn't actually an operating system is really hard. And like, yeah,
Right there with
that's
you.
all.
Yeah, that's good. Nate, go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself. Still can't hear you, Nate. Are you muted twice like you normally are?
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, yeah. There we can hear you. Now we hear your dulcet tones. There you go.
Okay, so first of all, this is open source crap because it switched my audio source again. Thanks a lot, Jitsi. Anyways, that's a slight rant. That's number one. Number two, I find a lot of problems happen when you try to integrate different systems together with Linux, especially applications, because there's so many different types of applications and so many different versions that a lot of times it's hard to actually tell somebody, oh yeah, just go use Kden Live because it works, it's fine. Okay, well, should I install the dev package? Or maybe just do the flat pack, or maybe just do this one, or maybe if you're on Arch, go here. It's a mess. And it does actually hurt the newcomers where they're used to just, oh look, here's a button, I click it, it's downloaded, I execute. There we go. And that's my rant.
Yeah, totally agree. Storm, go ahead.
What's it? There's people who haven't spoke. If they want to go first, I can wait.
Okay, D-dubs.
Yeah, first thing, RBM's not wrong about Arch, but like anything, I think that's a little oversimplified. It's false. But my actual rant today is actually on Cache OS because they built the distro using other people's packages, but yet restrict who can use their repos. Oh, sorry, your Arch isn't good enough for us. So that's my only real rant right now. But also RBM uses NixOS, so you can't really complain about Arch if you're using NixOS.
That's true. I think that's 100. That should be a rule, because NixOS users are 100% more obnoxious than Arch users, and that is a verifiable, quantifiable fact.
Oh yeah, I'm proof. I'm proof of that. You know that.
The arrogance of Arch users turns out it could be picked. I kid about that. War Thunder, go ahead.
I was going to say mine is kind of a mixed bag as well. I'm sure I'll probably hurt someone's feelings with it, but my thing is Wayland is and is not ready. It's one of those things where parts of it are not even user friendly, like accessibility. Just throw it out the window right now. Like it hasn't worked on that, but also explaining something as simple as I'm trying to download a file from my web browser to a particular directory, but because of certain permissions and certain portals I have to go through, and if whatever distro you're on doesn't have a particular portal set up or something, like it's overcomplicated. And then me as a basic user goes, well, why the crap can I not just download this image meme I found on the internet to my documents folder? Well, my browser now, because it's a flat pack per se, that's my other rant, is permission systems and containerized apps are just a nightmare. Of my browser I just installed through the GUI software center doesn't let me download to my pictures for memes, so I can't download Linux cast memes for days because I don't have permissions to my documents folder by default.
There are no Linux cast memes. RBM, go ahead.
I would like to say that I was not complaining about Arch Linux, and I do acknowledge that NixOS is, excuse me, is additionally, in my opinion, a project distro also, and that's how I'm treating it. And when people ask for suggestions on distros to check out, I actively tell them don't do NixOS as a desktop distro, because maybe that's another unpopular opinion I have, but I don't think it's great there. It doesn't perform great as a desktop OS, but I do think that it's great as the package manager in general and all the other fun things it can do. But my second hot take is that systemd and Pipewire are good. People should be more open to embracing them. And Leonard Pottering and Case Evers are pretty freaking brilliant project maintainers and developers, and they should be, maybe they need some help with their communication, but so did Torvalds. So somebody can figure it out, I'm sure. But systemd and Pulse Audio originally, and now Pipewire, did a lot of really important and really useful and really great things to move us forward. And it's time to let go of all of the hate and just embrace it, because you're stuck with it now too, maybe unfortunately. Even protest distros like Devon or whatever, Artix, I guess. I don't remember if Artix is one. They like, you can have them forever, but you're not going to get very far. Eventually, you're going to need systemd for something if you're using Linux, because you're going to run out of options.
I saw Silent Bob put his hands up, like, and he's using Slack, where like use it forever.
Yeah.
We use Pulse Audio for. They're probably still using ALSA.
No, I'm using Pipewire. It works great.
Okay, Storm, you're next.
I know how to use the computer. What's it? With Wayland, the kind of thing I find funny about it was the whole point about it was to get rid of that overcomplicated mess that is X11, and it has both succeeded and then kind of tripped over itself. And I'd love to see greater improvements in it. Also, just like Linux is a really good package manager, but it's easy for us to access it as like, daily drivers of Linux. But people who are new to Linux, package managing is an enigma. Like, is it Zipper? Is it Pacman? Is it apt? Is it this? Is it that? Do you even understand what distro you've installed? Because like, a lot of people might think, oh, I'm going to download Linux. They Google it. They click on the first Linux page to come up that has a download on it. They download it and they don't know where to go from there. I think like a lot of like, there isn't a refinement on ease of access to getting started with Linux unless you're going to trail the forums. And I think expecting people to just go trail forums is not great enough. I think the work that Linux Cast has been doing and other channels, as well as like article writers, have a precipice to actually advance Linux to a lot of users. But I think at the minute it's like it's trying to travel through an enigma for a lot of people. I can't remember who it was, but someone else pointed out. I think it was Henry, where like trying to teach a new user all these different things. It's a slurry. Like, we need better education services that don't normalize people to Windows all the time. That shit really annoys me, because then people are just kind of growing up and like Linux is this enigma.
Also, I mean, when you Google something, you're gonna get an apt you're gonna get instructions for apt, like absolutely apt, right? And if you're using like Manjaro or something like Linus Sebastian or whatever, when that Linux challenge, he thought he was going to be able to use apt on Manjaro. It just didn't work. That was the promise behind Flatpaks and snaps, but nobody uses those in the terminal. They use them in the GUI file manager, or the GUI file manager on the brain, GUI software store. Nate, go ahead.
I was going to say, first of all, if people search Linux, the first thing is going to come up, let's be honest, is Ubuntu. And that within itself is a rant. Anyways, uh, one of my biggest issues that I have too within the Linux community is the fact of the communities. The foundations can barely get along with each other versus actually trying to co-op together and actually do something beautiful. Instead, they just want to fight amongst themselves and then also fight each other to go different ways. And at some point, you've got to realize, okay, I understand we want to do our own different things, but maybe we should come together and actually make something nice for once.
Nah. D-dubs.
Well, Nate, unfortunately, you're dealing with egos, and that's just unfortunate. Everybody's a little bit competitive. Even not gonna pick on RBM, but RBM, for example, doesn't like NixOS on the desktop, and I've had zero issues. But it's again, it's one of those, your mileage may vary. But yeah, there's kind of tribalism. It's funny, Storm. You mentioned about all these disparate things. Yet, in the last beating mat, you were talking about, do we need Cosmic, and why is Cosmic reinventing everything? They're doing it for that very reason. They're going to present a unified, consistent interface with unified, consistent controls and theming and all of it. You may choose something else. Well, I don't like Cosmic File Manager, so I'll use Thunar. But the thing is, out of the box, all the controls are there in the same place, in the same way. If I change the theme, all the apps are going to change. Not, oh, well, this Qt app and this, none of that. Or like your cursor flipping between Wayland and X, all those little annoying little things. So, yeah, I think things like Cosmic, I'm just picking on them. Plasma had that promise, but kind of fell flat, honestly.
Elementary OS, literally exactly the same thing, but without the hardware monetary support behind it, right?
Yeah, and War Thunder, we talk about like portals and stuff. Unfortunately, that's not a Wayland problem. That's a what distribution you were using problem. And is it related to Wayland because it's only effectively now getting a lot of attention the last few years? Probably, you know. And there's a lot of schism in free desktop, and Cosmic, like I say, has done something with their own WL roots, I think, and then desktop is coming up with something else, and then it's that part of it is kind of a mess, and that goes to Nate's point where why can't we just all get along
Well,
and focus on consistent goals? But unfortunately, I want to do it this way, and you want to do it that way, and we don't meet in the middle.
well, my thing about Wayland, just real quick on that, is that I think Wayland is ready. I think it's 100% ready, basically even for NVIDIA users. What's not ready is portals. Portals are the bottleneck, like, especially if you've ever used Hyperland. Almost so, like Hyperland itself is very, very stable. It seems like every time I've had a problem, it's always been the Hyperland portal that's had an issue. And usually with screen capturing or something like that, something that doesn't really affect all that many people. So if you're just like a normal user, you're not going to have any problems. But if you're doing something like capturing your screen or streaming or something like that, you're going to have more problems, and that's the portal that's causing those issues.
Yeah, and that's been improved though.
Well,
But you're right. There's still a lot of issues with it, and only now is the protocol for screen sharing and stuff actually been created and accepted.
Global short keys and all that kind of stuff. War Thunder, go ahead. You're next.
Yeah, I do agree, D-dubs, with you on Wayland and whatnot. And I do believe it is very close to being ready and whatnot. For me, what I use in Cinnamon and whatnot, it'll be ready when Cinnamon's ready, which, I mean, even this last release, leaps and bounds. It's clear once you put the development work into it and whatnot. I've been in the Wayland session. It actually, yeah, it's really buggy, but, it is called experimental, right? But actually, this time around, I could actually use it, not crash it, which is impressive. Which was kind of my thing. No, my other thing I wanted to say was, and it's kind of a hot take, but I think Nate knows where I'm coming from. You don't need the latest software in everything you do. You're okay using the piece of software that works for you, whether it's 4 years old, whether it's 2 years old, whether it's whatever. I see tons of people coming in that I've talked to are like, oh, I've got to run the bleeding edge kernel, or I've got to run the bleeding edge Kden Live, or I can run the bleeding edge this, that, or the other. And no, you need the piece of software that works for you. If that's the bleeding edge, great. If not, I'm okay if it's 4 years old if it still gets the job done.
That's the attitude of someone who uses ThinkPads from 20 years ago.
Hey, I am on LMDE right now. I am on Debian essentially.
Yeah,
I'm good
and
with
you're running it on a machine probably from at least a couple years ago, though, right?
Yeah, this is an HP Mini. It's a Ryzen 2200G, so yeah.
So a few years ago, if you had a brand new 4090 in there, you're gonna want to lay a more frequent, more recent kernel. Now, you don't need the most recent version of Firefox. You don't need the most recent version of Discord or whatever, but Flatpak solves those problems.
Yeah.
At least for me. Des, I guess your name is gonna confuse me because it's not a full word. So you're next. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
So, the different package managers bugs me too. And it bugs me so much I started my own project trying to more unify them with a shell script is what I tried to do, which I'm working on Ubuntu support now. I don't really like Ubuntu as a distribution so much, but I have to work on it to really get the first package manager fixed.
Cool. RBM, you're next.
Man. So we have lots of standalone Wayland compositors, and that's great. I actually can't think of standalone floating window managers on Wayland, if you guys know of any.
LabWG, something like that?
LabWC. I do remember
That's
seeing
it.
about
Yeah, it's
that
like
one. Thank
OpenBox,
you.
but for Wayland, yeah.
Yeah. That one. So I remember that one. But most of them are tiling that I've seen. Don't know why that is. But we definitely need a more unified experience. So Cosmic is doing a great thing by more or less existing in the way that they're doing, a kind of a hybrid desktop environment. That's really cool. But also, GNOME has been on a good path for a long time since they broke off into GNOME 3 and tried this new approach that they're going on. And I don't know if it works really well for a lot of people. Just the workflow doesn't seem to make sense for a lot of people. But when you do get familiar with it, if it works for you, it works better than a lot of other like workflows that are based on the same concepts from the early 90s with early Apple computers and early Windows interfaces with that stuff. Like it's definitely time to try graduating from that, which is why I like tiling so much. But it doesn't address everything that needs to be addressed from those old concepts, or should at least be revisited. And GNOME has been doing that for a really, really long time, and they probably need better communicators to get that out. Because that's like, it's pretty good as a desktop environment. It's just kind of frustrating that they want to be their own thing so much that they're kind of not cooperative with the rest of the other communities around it. And that sucks. But what they actually do for themselves is pretty great. Take it or leave it.
Yeah. West Fun, you're next.
Alrighty. I know that this horse has been beaten to absolute death, but there are just too many options for everything. I mean, the differences between Pulse Audio and Pipewire, Wayland and X11, the endless amount of desktop environments, package managers, distros. I think in terms of kind of adoption of Linux, it's paralyzing. Um, because they're just right off the bat, there are too many options to consider. I mean, when you first join, say you hop on Ubuntu and you learn that snaps are awful, um, and everybody hates Ubuntu, then you start looking around, you find Arch, you hate Arch, you go to Manjaro. There, to follow up on that, and what a lot of people have said is, um, there's also too many distros that aren't really distros. They're more of like skins for existing things. So I treat Endeavor, uh, Manjaro as just skins on top of Arch rather than kind of their own things, if that makes any kind of sense. They don't really do a whole lot differently, so there's no point in them existing, but they still do anyways.
I'm having a really hard time not saying the name of the distro we're all thinking of. Sorry. uh, so I just came up. So you were talking about too many distros. One of the things, what I don't know if it's technically possible, but someone should take like a Debian base and create a universal ISO. Basically, what they do is write a GUI interface that would allow you to browse through. So it'd be a live image. You'd boot into it. It'd be basically Debian, but there'd be an application that would pop up, and then you'd have a GUI. That GUI would allow you to basically browse through most of the distros, the main ones or whatever. You select one, it would then download that ISO and install it. And that way you could kind of, I know, I understand that the part of the live ISO is to try it right firsthand, but kind of having everything, all of your options in one place would be kind of neat. It's probably a stupid idea. Nate, go ahead.
First of all, that would be a massive ISO. You'd be competing
Well,
with
no,
Windows.
it would have to be it'd have to be a net install, right? Like it wouldn't
Right.
have those other ISOs on there until you downloaded it, right? So
Right.
it wouldn't be
Okay.
good for people without internet, but you know what I mean. It would be something.
Well, you could create two technically. You could do net install and then also do a offline version.
100 gigabyte ISO.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest, another thing I was thinking of is documentation. Sometimes with Linux, it's horrible. And when I say horrible, I mean obsolete. Like there just is none. And you could search forums all day long. You can Google all day long. You can go ask your AI friend. You can ask people on Discord, and just sometimes there's literally nothing. And that within itself is a bad problem Linux has. A really bad problem.
I think simultaneously there's too much documentation that's like really freaking old, and you like you go and you Google a problem and you're gonna end up on a Stack Overflow from 2008, and does that still work today? Maybe, but you guarantee someone who doesn't know what they're doing is going to try it, and then they'll end up. Why is my kernel panicking? You know, it's really silly. Xaniath, go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Yeah, my unpopular opinion is why is people working on so many different distros when they can actually select something of the top major ones and actually really make a big change in the community? That's what I think.
Because
That's a very unpopular probably opinion, since there's a lot of there's a lot of million distros. Like, what are they, like reskins or gaming this or whatever? But literally, I mean, why doesn't people make videos of just teaching people how to make a regular distribution into a gaming distribution in itself? Well, some people don't even do content of how to do Steam or Lutris. In some cases, especially the major ones that get watched the most, don't even show that type of thing. And I think sometimes that could be a helpful in the community in itself, especially if you want people to actually go from Windows to Linux.
Yeah. Storm, go ahead.
What's it? I like a thing you mentioned with your universal ISO and stuff like that. I feel another thing as well is not a lot of distros make desktop switching, like desktop environment switching, very easy. Like sometimes it can completely fuck the interface because Kubuntu, Ubuntu Budgie, and other stuff like that. The DE is like integrated into the way the fucking OS is formed, so you can change it, but your applications will get fucking like absolutely terrorized. Wayland has a fucking nightmare trying to consider its existence. While there's other distros where they make it. Debian is pretty good for this, and what's it? Antics, which is like it's like a spit off from old Ubuntu. Um, Other distros like that, you literally just have like a drop down menu, and you can just pick a different distro, and you got to install them onto the thing yourself. It doesn't just come with them all installed, but you just switch like that, and the whole system works and switches properly and doesn't have a cosmic nightmare. Stuff like this that makes the whole system easier, because I like the idea of the netboot, and then you look at it and there's like a set of images for like the distro you're going to install. It just gives you like an idea, maybe a description that just like explains. So they're like little pages, because if you're doing a net thing, you could have like like the fucking horrible looking DOS pages from a Windows 3.1 install. You have those with text on it that sort of tell you different things about it. You can click on them and then agree with a different thing, and we can make this sort of like sort of flow where people can very easily get a hold of this. And for tinkerers like us, you need one fucking USB, not fucking all of these cunts I have in my fucking drawer, because you need to have like this and that. You've got your puppy Linux install for fixing all the other cunts that like to break. You've got your
there goes my monetization right there, man.
we're long enough into the video that we can swear.
Aura, we apologize to your cousin for all of those words. Just to try to explain them, okay? All right.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, there's
Yeah.
a major issue with this sort of thing.
I think where we're gonna go, because we're gonna have immutables. Being able to switch between desktops with an immutable is very, very easy, or even with like NixOS, it's just like 1 or 2 lines. You know, having something that would automate something that's much easier than on a traditional Linux desktop, where like you were talking about, everything you install Plasma, it's integrated with everything else, and then you try to install it, it's going to uninstall half the operating system. It's really hard to switch back. But also Btrfs snapshots, if you're going to do that, like seriously, it's the best thing ever. D-Dubs, go ahead.
Thanks. I couldn't disagree more with there should be one OS or one package manager or whatever. People, the users, consumers will decide which is best for the majority of people. Innovation comes from these things. For example, I've seen a lot of people really like the animations that are now in PyCom. Well, that came from one person, and he tried to build his own little distro. And out of that, which he's pretty much abandoned it, but out of that came some really nice features that he pushed upstream. And I don't want anybody else telling me what is best for me. So yes, it causes fragmentation and it causes annoyance for those of us who decide to try different ones or whatever. But some folks just stay with Debian. That's what they want. It does everything that they need. Others, Mint. I really like Nix, but some of its annoyance is making it really hard for me to use it as my truly daily driver. So yeah, I want the choice. If I want to go to Arch tomorrow, then guess what? I'll do Arch. I'm using DWM right now. Just in part because of Drew, and it's like it's a fun kind of discovery to try different things, and the fact that they're out there. And yes, some of them are reskins, but you know what about Endeavor and some of the other ones? At least there's a little bit of delay in their repo before they push them out. And I think someone who is on Arch, who's not a skilled veteran of Linux, and they really want to use Arch, well, that's probably a better one for them than vanilla Arch.
Well, so we're
Go ahead.
never going to get rid of choice, right? I mean, Linux is the way that it is. It's not going to go like all of a sudden someone's not going to come out and step out. Drew's not going to gain almighty power and just decide that Debian's the only distro out there. Like that's just
No, but see, some people argue though against that. Argue against too many choices.
Yeah, I
There
understand.
shouldn't be. When you say there shouldn't be, that's me telling you that I need to limit your choices. That's what that phrase means.
Right.
There are too many. Let's reduce them. Well, how are you going to do that? You're going to have to force them.
I agree with your point. What I was gonna
Yeah.
say is that I don't think that getting rid of choices is the ultimate answer. What the answer to the fragmentation problem is and always has been is making it easier to choose, and going through and having some form of always up to date resource that tells people who are coming to Linux, this is what Ubuntu is and who's it's good for. This is what Arch is for. This is what Gentoo's for. These people should use LFS, which would be literally no one, right? I think what we need is a Wikipedia of Linux. I've talked about this like on several lugs now. Like I just need to do the damn thing and actually do it, right? But having a singular resource that can explain the vast majority of these things to users that they can explore. Someone, what's that tool? It's like distrochooser.com or something like that, where you go and you take a test or whatever and it tells you what distro you might use. Something like that just needs to be popularized so that it's easier to choose, because really the problem with fragmentation just is that humans don't do well with a lot of choices. That's the reason why Apple is the way that it is, right? If they want them to be very narrow-minded in terms of choice, right? So Linux is opposite of that, and I think that that's a good thing overall, because people like their choices on Linux, and it's a good thing. But for new users, getting over that overwhelming feeling is something that we've never done very well at all. Nate, go ahead.
I was gonna say, as far as the one distro, as much as I hate to say this, I feel like it's going to be SteamOS once they finally release it, because so many gamers are moving towards Linux. And
shit.
So, but with that being said,
What's
it? I do want to say, with that being said, I feel like part of the issue with saying there's too many distros is that there's too many that people start, and then it gets stopped, and then it's just fragmented, and people keep trying to download it and keep trying to use it, but yet it's dead. And that, I don't know, it kind of creates an issue. And I feel like somehow there needs to be like a cleanup or something. There needs to be something in place, like, okay, if you haven't updated this thing in 5 years, maybe just let it go away.
Yeah, there are a lot of dead distros out there for sure. I'm also muted, so you guys can actually hear me. Sorry, for whatever reason, I got completely booted out of Jitsi when I moved the window around. That's something wrong. I'm trying to get Tyler in the actual chat because he can't, for some reason, can't join Drew. He's in the chat saying that he can't join. Not sure what's going on there. Are we maxed out on people? I don't think so, but I can't actually copy anything without getting booted myself. Anyways, RBM, go ahead. I'm sorry, I don't know who's actually next. I'm sorry. I'm completely lost here. Give me a second. War Thunder, you're next, actually. Go ahead.
No, that's all good.
Got my list.
No, I was going to say that I think there's a lot of distros out there that don't necessarily teach users best practice when it comes to their data. And I know I'm spoiled on Mint because Timeshift is right there, but Matt, you talked about it with like Snapper and whatnot. Actually having users be able to set up some form of a snapshot, because it's no matter what operating system you run, whether it's Mac, whether it's Linux, whether it's Windows, you will hit that point of something is going to go wrong. And when it does, where's your data? Where's your backup plan and whatnot? And there's a lot of stuff out there that doesn't teach the user good backups. And I would be one of them that learned the hard way. I'm not going to pick on Pop OS, but the last time I was on Pop OS, I was messing around and whatnot, and I accidentally removed a package that I shouldn't have, and that was before they did their own built-in recovery environment, and I was SOL. I had to go re-download on another computer an ISO, reflash a USB because I was dumb. I formatted the USB I had, and I was just screwed. So while I learned, had I done better management or backups or whatnot, I could have recovered from that. And there are distros like Arch that if you're going to tinker around on them, you're probably going to break something. And having a backup strategy would be a good idea, unless you really don't care about your system.
RBM, go ahead.
Okay. So most distros are glorified post-install scripts, just prepackaged as an ISO. So I think that these developers that keep making these new spins these derivative distros based off of the old standby Fedora, Debian, Ubuntu, and Arch. Typically, there's not too many other ones that they're based on. Sometimes you get a derivative of a derivative, but generally that's about it. And it would just be really nice if all of those, or maybe at least most of those, would just embrace the fact that they are post-install scripts and just be post-install scripts, so that we don't have to support 12 versions of the same distro, because it would really simplify my life, at least. I don't know how many other people do a lot of support, but it's very frustrating to have to deal with 6 different kinds of Ubuntu, because every desktop environment gets its own version of the ISO, and everything is just ever tiny, so slightly different in a way that makes nothing universal anymore. It's very irritating.
Yeah, Storm, go ahead.
Yeah, what's it like? Very much still on that same topic, because it's been sort of a really big like elephant in the room. It's kind of that problem. It's not that there's too much choice; it's that there is too much choice of too little choice. Like, oh, there's loads of choice. I don't think most starting users are thinking about OpenSUSE or even Arch. Definitely not Gen 2. So what is it? It's what's Kubuntu? What's Ubuntu Budgie? What's Ubuntu? Ubuntu happens to be the worst one out of all of them as well, because it comes with like a fucking iPhone ass interface. Like, what is this, Android? Like, and so what's people's introduction? They go to main Ubuntu, they come onto it, and it looks shit. It actually looks shit compared to Windows with that fucking standard interface. GNOME can actually look exactly like Windows 11 because of its, Windows 11 basically copied GNOME with their like interface. There's certain aspects they did better. I think Matt mentioned it in a video with the like sort of video, the window operations, the curved edges and the animations are pretty good with Windows 11. But Ubuntu is a nightmare. Like, you want to get into it, it's like you want to make it look good. You want to make it be a functional like desktop that's as good or better than using Windows. You have to be smart enough to know, or knowledgeable enough, I should say, to know that Kubuntu or Ubuntu Budgie or something like that is your best place to go, because it actually has a more customizable interface. Ubuntu, the best distro. But what's it? I feel that there's that kind of situation that kind of plays back to my thing, where you need to have the desktop environment be a separate step that is made a fluent and easy operation to choose from, and make it easy to download others and switch between them without it being a problem. They should not be integrated into the goddamn fucking OS, and it shouldn't be that you've got 1,000,001 different websites because Kubuntu isn't ran by the same people who do Ubuntu, fucking, and all that other stuff. So we have like a lack of streamline. Like the Ubuntu project, all of the ones who have literally Ubuntu in their name should be fucking working together. There needs to be better cooperation for the distros to get tightened up. Debian keeps all their shit in one fucking corner. Like Debian's obviously not always the best example. They're a bit of a mess, and because it's a server OS, it's not like it's optimized for most normal PC use. But so that aspect's really important. But yeah, free desktop would be pretty cool. Yeah, so like you've got that lack of the desktop being literally integrated into your OS in a way that's damaging.
The look on Drew's face when you called Debian a server OS, just I thought he was coming through the camera.
What's it? You know it's true though. You have to accept it. But it's like what I will say is we need a situation where people aren't being put in a place where they might break their OS because they want to change. Because that's the thing I didn't mention. It's not just that it strips away a lot of your apps when you uninstall them. If you've ever installed a desktop environment on top of Ubuntu after you've removed Plasma, it doesn't install all the things you need. So you have like cut down GNOME. Like I installed Budgie on a formerly Plasma system, and I ended up with cut down GNOME. I couldn't change most of the settings.
Yeah. GNOME sucks, by the way. Fraggle, go ahead.
I agreed.
Don't forget to unmute yourself. Yep, that's how mute works. All right, Nate, why don't you go ahead and we'll see if Fraggle can get his microphone to work.
Well, I was going to piggyback off of something else that RBM said. One of the other biggest problems with distros is that there's way too many distros that are basically just rices and never should have been a distro and should have been just an easy install script to make it look like the certain base distro that they're doing, but yet they want to make a whole ISO and claim, oh, look, I made a whole new distro. No, you just reskinned one, but you're still using all the same packages and all that stuff. So that's another issue that I have with
I'm gonna
with that particular issue.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with D-Dubs here that I don't think that taking that away or that being a problem isn't really a problem, because first off, I think most of the time those things that we call just rices started off with just them making their own distro and then sharing it with people, right? They didn't. I mean, I don't think that the vast ones that we're thinking of ever really started out as like, oh, we're gonna be like the next big thing. I mean, maybe some of them did, but not all of them. They just started out as a personal project that kind of gained momentum over time. But also, I think a lot of people cut their teeth on creating their own distro. You know, learning how to package an ISO, making sure all the packages are there, making sure it works, making sure it compiles and all that stuff. I think that that's okay. And I also think that it benefits the Linux community for that kind of stuff to exist, because eventually Linus and friends are going to get really freaking old and they're going to die, you know, and we need so here's my next hot take. So I'm gonna push ahead here in front of some people here for just a second, but my hot take goes off from that is that the iPad and the smartphones have ruined Linux for the future. And I truly believe this because I can't speak for the age of everyone here in the room, but back in the day, like in when computers were first starting out, you tinkered and you had to fix things and you had to learn how computers worked. These days, if you're an iPad bro or you're a Chromebook person, and that's how you grew up, you're not learning how computers work, because that's not how computers work. They're not closed off hard boxes that you can't do anything with. That's not how true computing actually works. And unfortunately, because we have an entire generation that are iPad bros and Chromebook people, they're not going to have the experience that the people who grew up in the 90s or who were adults in the 90s would, because those people had the ability to, or had the opportunity to learn how computers work, and they became the Linux developers that we know today. Eventually, that generation is going to retire, and we're going to be left with a whole bunch of people who don't know what the hell they're doing, and that's going to be a big problem, at least in my opinion. Fraggle, did you get your together?
Wenn du den Chat öffnest, dann kommt dieser Sound nicht mehr.
Okay. Fraggle? No. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. I see the microphone go off. Still can't hear you though, Fraggle. Oh. I heard a little bit. Linux problems with audio. Never happens. Okay. RBM, go ahead. You're next.
We should let go of our attachment to system packages, embrace flat packs and distro boxes more thoroughly, and stop trying to be the system administrator of our desktop like workstations. You need to get, you got to get things done on your system. Just treat it like an appliance instead of the like a little machine to tinker on at the same time.
Are you
like,
a
use the
NixOS
separation of
person?
concerns.
Sorry.
No, I use NixOS. I am not a NixOS person. I don't know how I can stress this enough. I don't recommend NixOS as a desktop PC.
Like, I'm pretty sure you just defined
I
what
like it
NixOS
just
wants.
fine, but I don't think that it's a great fit. And I don't know how long I'm going to stick with it. I'm kind of committed to it, so we'll see. But yeah, don't pick distros for systems that you need to do work on. Like, pick distros that work for you instead. Like, stop being the system administrator of your system and just be a user. Just embrace being a user, especially when what you need most of the time is just a web browser. Like, when you just live in the web browser and that is your operating system already, just let it be. You can do that. It's okay.
Nate, go ahead.
So I'm going to circle back to the rice distro thing. Zany is actually a good example of what a distro should be, because I know him and D-Dubs and several other people spent months working to get NixOS to actually work and make it slightly easier for other people to be able to use it. With that being said, if you're just ricing a skin over a distro, I don't accept that at all, because it's just a rice. Now, with that being said, I will say, if you package it as that, great, but do something with it. Make yourself stand out. Like SteamOS, it's based off of Arch. We all know this, but they did a lot of work to make it really simple and really easy.
Okay. Arch Penguin, go ahead.
I just wanted to weigh in on what you were saying earlier about, you don't know how old. I'm an older fellow as well. And yeah, I kind of noticed over the time, I've pretty much watched the evolution of most technology in my lifetime. I kind of noticed the push with technology to kind of dumb it down and take the control out of the hands of the user. It seems to me, I'm being paranoid, but what I would call the iPadification of the world. And I'm going to have to push back with a little bit of what this other fellow was saying about how just be a user. I think we need to take back control of our devices and become the administrator. I think we've let that slip a little bit too far. That's the only thing I really wanted to say.
Well, the immutables are definitely not for you then, Arch Penguin. They definitely don't want you to be the admin. Everything is automated. Storm, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree. We need to take control over our computers. I think there is definitely something to take from, the idea of needing to be like an actual user of your operating system at times, like when you're doing work and stuff like that. Having some stability to your operating system is definitely good, but we need to be the admins. And I feel that, like, as like technology has developed, because intellectuality is not as big as a thing as people might think it is. Everyone's an intellectual, as Gramsci rightly says. We've got to look at the fact that more people are going to get into computers, more people are going to get into understanding computers, and we're going to have more people knowing at least basic aspects of software and how it operates, to the point that We're going to get a larger amount of people coding, a larger amount of people developing. We can get community control over our shit and get the fucking corporations out of it. Like, we need Ubuntu and all them lot, they're fucking Trojan horses. They are sabotaging the fucking Linux community with corporations. A lot of them are. And they might make good distros because they've got a lot of fucking money behind them. But if we come together as a community, we can make shit as stable as Steam OS's on the Arch platform. You know, I'm not even an Arch promoter. I think the fucking Arch community is a fucking toxic mess. But I'm saying that even Arch, something that's considerably known to be unstable, could be stable. So think about like what Debian or our own distro based on GNU Linux and other stuff like that could be if we actually compile ourselves together. And the chauvinists that kind of control a lot of development in certain spaces get kicked out of their fucking spaces and we take over.
I'm with parts of yours that we just said. I completely disagree. I don't know how I become the corporatist in the room, but without Red Hat, without Canonical, without SUSE,
I'm not
Linux.
saying what they've added isn't good. I'm saying that like their control over it is poisonous.
I think those are mutually exclusive viewpoints, mainly because if they
How could it be saying someone develops, industry was
okay.
developed good, but it still like devastated the working class and exploited the shit out of people? I think like something can be exploitative and still be technologically advanced, but we are the people. Who develops these inside these corporations? Workers. So like, if we come together and do it, we can do the same shit. Technology is more accessible now than it has been in God knows how long. So I feel that we can do what the corporations have been doing, but have it in our control, and that's becoming a much more accessible thing for the future. I'm not saying what they've developed is bad. I'm saying their existence in the space is toxic and kind of goes against the original principles of Linux being about open source control over technology. So
I don't know that if you go back and look at the history of Linux, I don't know that.
Oh, it got caught up with corporate stuff pretty early on. I know.
Yeah, we really shouldn't get into the whole thing because we would devolve into stuff. Fraggle, did you get your thing? Did you get your thing fixed? Still no.
Still got nothing from you, Fraggle.
Make sure your source in Jitsi is correct. Venom is not trading Fraggle well tonight. All right, Nate,
Getting
go ahead.
absolutely blown over.
Well, I was going to say, I'm just going to make it real quick. In some ways, it doesn't need to be about just community, and it doesn't need to just be about corporation. It needs to be about balance. You need a mix of both. And the fact of the matter is, if you want Linux to get better, you got to have money, and you're going to have to start paying developers. And that's just the fact to it.
And
also, you still right, which is corporatism. I know, I understand, Matt. I'm actually kind of agreeing with you there, but I'm also saying too that you're also not wrong about the community as well. I think what needs to happen is you have both of them come together and greet each other in the middle ground and say, okay, we're doing this. Okay, we're going to take this over here and we're going to try to add it to this as well. Oh, that looks cool. Why don't we just go ahead and add it together in a main streamline? That will get you closer to a better Linux system than actually just saying, oh, screw corporations or screw, independent developers. No, meet in the middle and talk. And that's one of the biggest problems that Linux has is a lot of people don't really talk.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, so it's really hard to be non-corporatist from my point of view because of all the things like IBM, or not IBM, but Red Hat and Canonical have attributed. But I think that what you're saying, Nate, is true. That balance is key, and what we would really need is a community-based, community-run organization. I don't know, maybe you could call it the Linux Foundation. Just gonna put that out there. But instead of being 100% corporate, funded and controlled by the community, I think that for a true Linux Foundation that was controlled by the community, but was still, if the corporations want to have their input or whatever, they could, but it would be more community controlled. But I also don't think that would it's just not feasible in the way just things are structured. It's just never ever going to happen. Linux primarily is successful in the enterprise, and that's where if Linux wasn't popular in the enterprise, the corporations wouldn't care whatsoever. They'd go do something else with their money. So that's the only reason why they care. They don't care. They don't care if you like GNOME or KDE. They don't. They don't use those things. They're in the TTY all the time. RBM, go ahead.
I don't know if this is really a hot take, but it probably is. We should actually we should incite more instances of the left pad debacle that took down, half of the internet a few years back. We should get more software protests like that from license protected open source software that is being abused by, members are people who are corporations essentially who are not members of the community and do not give back and share alike, and instead steal from these solo software developers and then don't pay them and compensate them in return for it, and then charge you for the privilege afterwards. We should actually have more protests, software incitement, and take down the internet and convenience, and maybe lose a little bit of money for some people for a while, and just suck it up and deal with that to make a point.
Anarchy. Yeah, that's what we need. Drew, go ahead.
Oh, I actually put my hand back down, but that's cool. I was when when you put this this topic out on Discord, I was wondering how many things I could actually list that could be possible to add to the discussion, and I ended up with like 20, and I could probably unload about 15 right now, but there's definitely some ones that have been already covered. The one that I thought was interesting was systemd is good. I thought that was a very interesting take, because not everybody says systemd is good. I don't really have a preference, but I just thought it was spicy enough to put it on my list. A second one was Ubuntu is overrated, period. Is, even though it appeals to a lot of people, in especially the more newer users, it is clearly overrated. Rolling release models are overrated. And there was a couple more. Distro hopping is a waste of time, because it basically means that people aren't actually learning Linux until they settle on something. And to be honest with you, I kind of agree with this one, because regardless of what distro you end up on, your ability to use that software is only going to get better once you get more experience in whatever you're using, But then the last thing I was going to say is KDE is the worst desktop environment on the planet. Thank you.
He just mic drop. Nate, go ahead.
So I agree with most of everything except for the Ubuntu part, and I'm only going to go back to the Ubuntu part because there's a lot of things that they do, especially in the kernel, that actually helps you to have more support in hardware. And I've had lots of issues with Debian. I'm just going to be honest with you. But when it came to actual server hardware, Debian, I love it.
User error.
Well, it may be a user error. It may be a skill issue. But you know what? The fact of the matter is, we're talking about trying to get people to come to Linux. And we're going to have to get over the elitist attitude, for one. And for two, realize documentation is key. And for three, also, most applications do support Ubuntu. So can I go from there?
Drew was, by the way, he was just trolling you.
Oh, I know, but I'm just making a point.
Yeah, for those of you guys out there, Drew really wasn't telling that Nate had skill issues. We all know Nate has plenty of skill issues. He uses Pop OS. That in itself is a skill
Still better than stinking gecko.
We have I'm not even going to comment on that. All right. Anyways, so Zany, go ahead.
Well, so I've got my fresh hot take. You'll all be using ARM here before too long. Okay. Your days and years are numbered. All right. Be prepared. We're all moving towards ARM. Like, sure, it's mainly just Apple right now. But, like, I'm telling you, before too long, you're going to be ordering motherboards and the CPU is going to be soldered to that thing. And it's going to come as like a discount at $650, but it's got 24 cores overclocked at like 3.6, whatever. I don't know. Like, yeah, eventually we're all going to be running ARM processors on everything, and we're going to be sold on it being soldered to a motherboard for some ungodly reason. It's going to eventually happen. Now, I am saying this only in the consumer market, of course, but that's my hot take, and I cannot wait for the response that will be coming my way.
My response is that they make socketable ARM chips. Like that thing that does exist. Like so.
Yeah, but they're gonna phase that out. It won't be long.
They're by the way, they're huge. If you ever, I don't know if you guys ever seen those socketable ARM chips. They're the size of my head. They're huge,
it's big.
Fraggle, did you get your shit together?
Maybe.
Yes,
I don't know.
woo!
Is it good now?
Yes.
Yay. All right. So my hot take, Tyler, actually, I'll just say I somewhat agree with you. ARM is, well, risk V, at least. It's been leaps and bounds so much faster than ARM ever dreamt of. ARM's been around since like the 70s, 80s, like, and they're only getting this far now. But my hot take is that Red Hat should release something like a desktop OS, similar to what they had back in the early 2000s, like Red Hat with Fedora Core before they did the split and went Red Hat Enterprise Linux. I think that it would contribute a lot to a lot more people, especially consumer market or average users, adopting Linux and being happy with it too, more so than Windows. And I think that they can do it well. They contribute a lot to open source. They take a lot from open source. They make their money just with their services more so than anything. You can sign up for a developer account. You can run Red Hat for free. You don't have to pay anything for it. And I think that they should just get into the consumer market again. I think it would go a long way.
Nice. Nate, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Storm's next. Go ahead, Storm.
Oh yeah. Sounds like what you're on about there is IBM need to stop being jackasses about how they handle the market again. What's it? I think one of the things that we see is that we need stability. Like that's kind of the big problem. It's like we need the main OSs, the normal distros people use to have some semblance of just you can use it for everything you need to daily drive. Not this, oh no, I need to go back to Windows, or oh no, I need a second distro on there just to do other tasks. I'm a tinkerer. I love having fucking 6 operating systems on one fucking disk. That's joyful for me, but for most people, they want one. They want one and they want it to do shit well. And I think that we get so caught up in how joyful it is to fucking tinker that we forget about how much like that kind of scares off a lot of people. It makes Linux seem like this thing where you've got to take a degree in fucking coding to get yourself into it because every answer comes from the terminal or whatever.
I don't think the terminal is what scares people away. At least I mean, some
I was
people.
more using it as an example.
Some
but
people,
sorry.
yes, but almost like I've made several videos about why people don't use Linux, and every time I get the same three comments: gaming, Adobe, and CAD. Those are the three things that people just like. They're just not good on Linux, or they're not here, or whatever the case may be, right? And that's the reason why people don't use Linux, even if they had any interest in doing so. Nate, go ahead.
I wanted to say, uh, if we all move to ARM, Zany, um, would somebody in Linux please optimize it better for battery life? I know ARM within itself is good for battery life, but you got to do a little bit more because I got a feeling that where Mac OS could probably get like a full day, Windows might get 10 hours. I feel like Linux is still only get about 5 or 6, to be honest. So that's my hot take.
All right, Zany, go ahead.
Well, so my hot take is so like earlier and kind of often in the Linux community, we complain and moan about companies and organizations a lot. And one of the things that I think this community needs the most to get more users and like kind of flourish in a sense, especially with the software support and like the things that we all need, is we kind of need to start spending money and becoming customers at these organizations that we need stuff from. And that's when your actual complaints get heard. Because most of the time, the Linux community makes up almost nothing in sales, but complains the most. That is why in game development, most of the time they don't even want to support Linux unless it's super easy to do so, which Proton has really helped with. But I don't think you're going to have a Proton of like Adobe, DaVinci Resolve, like all these enterprise like software. You're going to essentially have to become customers if you want to complain and actually get hurt. Now, I'm not saying that works, but it's a better shot than just a whole bunch of people who aren't customers complaining. Like, doesn't really matter if it's not the people who are actually buying your product.
Yeah, money moves the world, right? Des, go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
I think that one of the things that can drive people away sometimes, and so this bugs me sometimes, is that sometimes Linux is thought of as a second class operating system by some. I used to think so earlier on, but I come to find out it's not necessarily that. It's just not yet used by a bunch of people for desktop, but there's a lot of things it can do better than like Windows, like not requiring reboots in the middle of your homework and things like that when you're 5 hours into it and then you lose all your work because you have to reboot. That's a Windows thing, but not so much a Linux thing, at least not on my distro.
Yeah. Nate, go ahead.
You're live streaming, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Adobe, I am a customer. I use Linux, so come to stinking Linux. Thank you. I'm done.
Let me ask you, Nate. Well, before we move on, if Adobe came to Linux, would you move from Resolve to Premiere?
No, I would still do DaVinci Resolve because just when it comes to actual like GPU acceleration and audio, a lot of people don't realize Resolve actually lines up your audio better than most video editors ever thought about being. And Premiere has this weird little issue where it likes to off sync by half a second. And so I'd rather not fool with it. Resolve does everything for me. Is the GPU acceleration? It just miles better than Premiere ever thought about. So,
Okay, I was just curious about that. If wondering if I was going to end up having to go get a Premiere license someday in the future, just so I could render the podcast.
Oh no. It would be mostly just Photoshop and Adobe PDFs. That would be really nice.
You guys
Anyways.
heard it here first. He wants Adobe PDF, Acrobat Reader back again. All right. Okay. So before you go, War Thunder, I have a hot take. Here's my elitist coming out to play. Linux does not need to be popular. I think every single person who's gone said something like along the lines like almost all the hot takes so far have been, how are we going to get more users? We're never going to get more users. Okay, we're never going to all of a sudden Windows 10 is going to die and millions of people are going to flock to Linux. It's not going to happen. It didn't happen with Windows 7. It didn't happen with Windows XP. It's not going to happen. And anyone who thinks that it's going to happen in some mass wave of people is naive. It's just not going to happen ever. And I truly do believe that. Mainly, I think that first off, Windows, such as it is, has a strong hold on the market, but also, and I talked about this earlier, kids these days don't use operating systems like we use. They use Chrome OS and they use iPads and they use their phones, right? That's their technology stack. Today, it's not the same as it once was, and eventually, yes, Windows will die off, but it won't. I don't truly believe that it will be actual Linux that takes over. It's going to be something like Chrome OS, maybe based on Linux, but not Linux itself, that becomes the mainstream. And that it pains me to say, but that's just the way that the future's going to go. I mean, I would bet all of my money on it. And maybe I don't have very much money, but I would bet all of it on that. That's the way that it goes, and it's disappointing. I think instead, what has to happen is just what has already happening. Linux will evolve slowly but surely into something that people can really truly use, and those who want to use it and are able to because their software needs are met will use it, and it will grow slowly and steadily to a point where it gets to, maybe 7 or 8% of the market, and that's where it will just stay uh, forever, or at least until computers become implanted into our brains or something, in which case I'm not sure that I really want to distro hop with a chip in my brain. I'm just saying that that's probably not great. Also, with Linux audio problems, we'd have a chip in our brain and then have no audio coming out, like we'd have Pipewire or Pulse Audio would freeze or something, and we wouldn't be able to talk or listen anymore. Arch Penguin, go ahead.
Oh yeah, man. I don't want my I don't want my key ring to get bad either. So definitely agree with you on that. And yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Like the way I feel about, I'm okay with it. I mean, if it gains popularity, I'm cool with that too. But let's keep in mind, the more it becomes popular, the more of a target it becomes as well. So just keep that in mind. It's okay if it's not super popular. Um, I would like to see more support for, professional programs, even if they are proprietary, such as, like Nate says, Adobe. I mean, sometimes you need that to get stuff done. Unfortunately, we don't have an open source one that even compares. I mean, if we did, we would use that instead, right? But we don't.
Yeah.
So yeah, Adobe, I think you're missing out here by you could definitely make at least a few bucks by allowing us to use it.
I think
But
they came out and said that they'd need Linux to have 100 million users for them to actually consider doing it. I don't know if that's an actual quote or not, but I also think that it's just I think that at this point it would be shocking to have it ever happen. In which case, what everybody should do is pool their money. If everyone who used Linux donated $1 or $2 to GIMP, maybe finally 3.0 would come out. I mean, I'm just saying, eventually they'd be able to hire enough developers to finally get that thing out the door. I'd still bet against it, but maybe eventually it would come. I think that they did just put the feature freeze in, so maybe it is finally moving in that direction. Just real quick before I move on, what I think what I said could come across as elitist because it was kind of, but I don't think that Linux can be welcoming to new users while simultaneously being realistic about the chances of them ever arriving in mass. You know, we can all say, well, we know we're never going to be popular, but that doesn't mean that we have to be gatekeepers and say, well, we don't want people here because we're trying to keep them, keep Linux as small and as tribal as possible. That's not what I was saying. It's more, we need to be realistic about the chances of Linux actually becoming popular and therefore give up on the goals of trying. That shouldn't be the motivation for anything that anyone in Linux does. Like the distros that proclaim to be the distro for new users, that's fine, but as long as you're realistic about the idea that you're not going to go make Bill Gates money because you created Zorin OS. That's just not going to happen. Hopefully you can make enough money to survive, but you're not going to be the next big thing that draws 1 million people to Linux. Nate, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say two things. Number one, I will still maintain this. Steam is the biggest gaming platform in the world, that hands down. And with them fully starting to support Linux, that will bring in users 100%. So it's going to get bigger. But number two, I'm not so worried about it bringing new people and it being more of an attack, so to speak, because technically, with the open source nature of Linux, that just means that over time there would be more eyes that's available on the code and would hopefully stop some things versus like Microsoft. They basically write code and then push it out to the user as beta testers the whole entire time. And then when something breaks, they're like, oh, sorry. I guess we'll put a new fix out. But good luck trying to get your Windows installed back and up and running.
Always deleting your files, that Windows. Westfine, go ahead.
All right. I am actually going to not necessarily disagree with you, Matt, when it comes to the fact that it's obviously never going to happen in droves. I mean, you are 100% correct in that. Anybody who is dying on that hill, so to speak, is delusional. That's just not how anything works when it comes to adoption of any platform, any piece of technology, anything really, especially this late in technology's life. What I do think is more of a possibility is that we start to see a higher rise in enterprise use of Linux, since that is primarily a lot of, Red Hat, SUSE's main target. That, and to an extent, that's their focus. That's what makes them money at the end of the day. That will, their support of the overall mentality of Linux as well, plus things like, dare I say, CrowdStrike, that will make a lot of companies reconsider. But obviously, that is not going to be an overnight thing. I mean, you're going to have to train people on a whole new system if they're not already trained. Bash, understanding the differences, the fact that kernel level anything is kind of off limits for the most part. It is a feasible possibility, but it is not a overnight possibility, if that makes any sense.
I agree, kind of, that enterprise is where the growth opportunities are. I mean, that's because that's where the growth has already happened. Um, but I don't think that it's as wide open as we would like it to be. Mostly, I mean, to go against the corporatist side of me that I talked about earlier, the anti-corporatist part of it is that if you're an enterprise and you're going to use Linux, you're going to use a corporate distro. You're going to use Red Hat. You're going to use SUSE. You're going to use Ubuntu. You're not going to go pick up Arch Linux and put it on all of your servers. It's just, I mean, or NixOS or whatever. It's just not. It's not going to happen because the thing that Red Hat and Canonical and SUSE provide is the support and the repositories that go along with that, the software that you're going to need in order to actually use this on your servers and maybe on your workstations or whatever, if you're going to go that far. The rest of the distros, no matter how stable we find them, aren't stable enough. They also don't have the software support really that those companies are going to require to have. And I think that in some ways, those corporate structures of Linux distros are the way. So the people who argue that there are too many distros, the corporate distros would be the ones that would be the ones to survive if all the rest of them were to go away. And part of that reason is because that's where the money's at, right? That's where all the I mean, literally, money makes the world go around. So, War Thunder, you're next.
Yeah, I was going to say because a lot of distros are friendly, or at least try to be friendly, right? Like my original introduction was like the Ubuntu and Zorans of the world before I got into everything else. But like having brought my wife in and converted her desktop over to Mint, it's I think it's less about does Linux need to get more friendly than it is. I believe that if you're going to go in and do something, somebody should come along with you for the ride, especially if they're interested in it as well. So rather than trying to tackle Linux on your own, trying to tackle Linux with other people is a lot better idea than trying to tackle it on your own per se, especially if you don't know what's going on and whatnot. If you can get under somebody's wing to teach you a lot of stuff, it's a ton of help. I don't know anything about NixOS, but I can tell you that just watching Zany do some of the stuff he does, even I've learned stuff that's applicable to other things that I do. So sometimes just finding those kind of people to kind of help take you under their wing and whatnot just is a lot easier than just trying to either make Linux easier, which I don't think really needs to happen at this point. I think it's more so some people just need a lending hand.
So what you're trying to say is that there should be more Linux user groups.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah. Tyler, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, until recently, we haven't really had a lot of the proper, like, monetary incentives to get people, like, actually onto Linux and further the. Because, I mean, I kind of disagree with what you were saying earlier, but, I mean, yeah, I don't think people are going to come in droves at all, but I definitely think with if we can get companies with monetary like profit incentives to get, I'm not talking about kids, but like when I say like young people, I mean like, like teenagers, like if they make Linux cool because it's free, it's easier to change and do what you want with, and there's better game support, you're getting better performance in the stuff that you've got to do for school. If we can get that type of compatibility on Linux, it goes a long way in like not really bringing people in, but setting up the people who will be using computers for the rest of their life on Linux. And it's really not even about making it like something that they need to use or something like that, but something that's actually appealing. Because sure, Windows comes on everything, but like most people, if you showed them something super cool and was like, yeah, it's just a download, you plug it in, turn it on, it installs itself, they'd be like, sure, I'd try that out. That looks awesome. Like, I don't think it's a hard sell to get someone to use something that's not pre-installed. It's just there's really hasn't been an incentive around getting things that they would want to use on that cool thing there.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree. But well, there's part of it that I agree with is that schools is where you need to get it right. If Linux could gain a foothold in education, then Linux would. I don't think they would come in droves, but it would slowly gain because at least some of those would be converts for life, right? That's the reason why Chrome OS has grown in the adult market is because a lot of kids these days use Chrome OS in school. Uh, but the problem is that there's just not the infrastructure for it in schools, and there never will be. Mainly because Google can pay schools to take. Like, here's 800 Chromebooks. Have them for free. We will give you the money to run them. We'll probably send someone to manage them for you, and you just go on. Linux can't compete with that type of budget. It's just impossible. And the corporations that do have like some coin in order to be able to kind of do that, they have no incentive to do it because their focus is on the enterprise, right? They're not dealing with desktop Linux hardly at all, and even the little bit that they do is for their own corporate benefit, right? They don't have the education market isn't something that they're looking to open up, unfortunately. If Red Hat wanted to get into education, I think that that'd be huge. Like it'd be awesome, but hardware when it comes to Linux is going to end up being more expensive because they can't subsidize it like Google can. The personnel needed to manage a fleet of Linux computers just isn't there. There's a lot more people who have Windows certs than have, Linux certifications, at least when it comes to desktop Linux, and which is what they would need, right? So, I don't know. Maybe I'm just too much of a cynic when it comes to that, right? D-Dubs, go ahead.
Yeah, as far as the Linux growth, I agree with you, not going to come in droves, but there is one difference versus some of the earlier, from XP to 7 to 8, is the hardware requirements weren't quite so dramatically different, and now with 10 going to 11, they've literally made you buy, in many cases, new computers, and not every place in the world can afford that. Literally cannot afford to go buy a new computer. So they're either going to run Windows 10 and risk it or potentially look at something else. So I do hope that there will be an increase in Linux because of the necessity of, of capital, not necessarily capitalism, but necessity of having to keep buying all this new equipment that, again, some people just can't afford. It's just not. And as far as the Linux on the desktop has one huge drawback, and that is the tools to manage it at a huge corporate level. My work PC cannot get on the network if it's not up to the current standards. It will literally prevent it, post whatever updates on or whatever. If I don't log on every so often, it's gonna time me out. All these tools that exist in Windows don't exist in Linux, not as a truly management system from top to bottom, even controlling, access, globally. So, if large corporations aren't going to go to Linux, they're just not right now.
No, not gonna happen. Nate, go ahead. You're next.
I'm going to pick it back off a little bit of what D-Dub said because my brain was kind of going along the same process. One of the biggest selling points that I give to people, especially in my area that I build PCs for, a lot of times they mostly just want to be able to use Chrome. And I will tell people like, hey, you have and they'll ask me like, oh, I need to buy a new PC. I'm like, do you have an older desktop? I can install Linux. And if all you're going to do is just use the web browser and maybe just the basic office tools, perfect, good enough. You can update through the GUI. You don't have to worry about anything else. And if something happens, just talk to me. And I think one of the biggest issues that we have, coming from an elitist standpoint myself, is the fact that we don't explain enough to other people. It's like, hey, Linux can be very easy as you want it to be, or it can be very hard as you want it to be. And also, the tools are the issue, especially in a corporation. It's just not there. It's really not.
Mm-hmm. Storm, go ahead.
Okay. What's it in education systems? That's not how it would typically work unless you're at like some posh charter school that's got enough money to pay for that kind of premium package. It'll work the same as it does with Windows. They don't really get any special support. You have a corporate support line that's fucking awful, and then your techs handle it. So it's actually not as hard to integrate because it's about educating techs, and a lot of these tech guys probably fuck around with Linux as it is. So in education, actually, it would be one of the more suitable places for integration. The problem is it's more about educational software support. Education has a lot of specific software it relies on, including Adobe. So like there's a whole lot of that that's really the issue, because they're not relying on Google for their support. They're relying on their techs. They have they get dumped with a load of computers, and their techs have to do everything to try and maintain them. That's sort of the usual sort of to and fro inside those spaces. Um, Education techs usually look really depressed. I'm not gonna lie. I remember fucking high school, like the two guys used to run our computers. They were fixing them all the time. Windows is a problem haver inside school. It's all it ever does, because Windows Server is a fucking piece of shit. But yeah.
Tyler, go ahead.
I'm not going to completely disagree with everything he said because she said, sorry. I do want to say though, like when it comes to schools, they do have a massive problem with the techs because normally it is Windows causing a big problem and they don't want to spend money on new computers. Google and all of them, they subsidize them, but that doesn't mean they're getting deals. Like schools get ripped off big time. And I don't think people give it enough acknowledgement. It is a problem with training the techs and getting people in there that want to change something, because most of them are so busy with fixing things. The idea of switching, learning something new, it's too much. They already have enough on their plate. Like half the school system is falling. I remember during my high school, we had a problem with one of our teachers who kind of managed the computers like as well, and he was always stressed out because our teacher drive would crash, and so like every single teacher around school was trying to get documents that wouldn't load, and the drive was connected but it wasn't actually working, so it was just a nightmare. Um, i I think Linux would be a good solution to go in there, but I don't know if we could have an actual company make enough money going around doing something like teaching and also setting up these systems, like converting old systems to Linux. I Hopefully you could start a business and make really good money doing that, but I don't know if there's already one that's even trying to do it. Maybe that's just my ignorance. Hopefully, but
Well, it's never about getting the kids to use Linux on a thing. It's not even about having people go in and install Linux on those machines. It's like D-Dub says, the tools to manage a fleet that size just don't exist on Linux. They just don't. And in order for those tools to be developed, I mean, it's a chicken and egg problem. I mean, either you do the tools and the fleet doesn't follow, or you put in the fleet of computers but you don't have the tools. Someone's going to have the incentive to do basically both at the same time, and then it would have to spread, right? And then the management tools such as they are, even things like parental controls, I mean, they're somewhat on Linux, and then you'd have to have school controls and global controls and all this stuff that just doesn't really exist. And add on top of that, every school district, let's say this happens, right? Every school district would then be using their own distro, and the tools may or may not work on those distros. Also, they all have classroom management software, things like God, Blackboard, I think is something like that. Blackboard. There's also one called like Mumu or something like that. I don't really remember, but they there are a couple of them, and those are, while they're primarily web based, there are dedicated applications that go along with them for the teachers, and those are Windows only. So it's a problem. Fraggle, go ahead.
I don't know what the education systems are like where Storm is, or where, down in the States where Tyler and Matt, you guys are. But up here, like I have kids that are in the school system and stuff like that. They use their Chromebooks, they use Chrome OS, but they also use Google Classroom. It's like they completely gave up. They don't even, like, the techs there don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to secure things. Even the kids know ways around to get onto games and everything like that on their Chromebooks just by using like VPN and stuff like that. Like the IT powers that be in the education system here in Canada, it's absolutely terrible. Like they don't know what they're doing. It's silly. They can't even set up Active Directory, let alone set up a whole Linux deployment with server and clients, which actually isn't that difficult to do. But they just lack the education from an IT level. It's atrocious. I can't stand it.
The Chrome OSification of
Yeah,
everything
it's
is
bad.
just it ruins everything that it touches. Nate, go ahead.
Well, I also want to say too, like one of the biggest issue is that there's so many schools here. Like even in just my state, I think like every little town has its own separate school. So it turns into a nightmare. But I will say, Zany, there is somebody that's in Oklahoma that is working to slowly convert people to Linux. Okay. So there is a business that is actively right now trying to convince people to go to Linux. I may be the owner, but it's working.
Let me guess, you were the employee of the month, and you love
For
that
2 years straight.
and that parking spot is just amazing.
Absolutely. Right against the cow.
The beef benefits are fantastic. RBM, go ahead.
So you can adopt self-hosting even if you don't have good hardware for it. I'm back on hot takes here.
It's fine.
Self-host on localhost, homies. Stop putting it off and stop getting deeper lost into the cloud ecosystems that you are already kind of stuck in, and start self-hosting some things, because you can do self-host on your local host, on your desktop or your laptop. And then, hey, remember I said systemd is good? You can socket activate those services so that they spin up, and then time them out so that they spin down when they're not in use, all automatically. And you can have wake on LAN for this thing too, so you can even hibernate the system. So just because you don't have hardware doesn't mean that you can't self-host. You can still do it on localhost and still get everything that you need out of it, because you really only need most of those services for like a few minutes, like to sync your files across or something. You don't need it running 24/7 every day of the year, all the time. You really only need it like, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes a month, a week, maybe in a day. So try to self-host on localhost. Don't wait until you have a server or anything.
Self-hosting is one of those really hard things, because when you go look for a tutorial, you come across Techno Tim and Raid Owl and all those guys, and they all have these obviously multi tens of thousands of dollars worth of hardware in their server rooms, and you're like, oh, is that what I need in order to have a
That's another problem that I live by a hot take that people should stop looking for answers in tutorials and start looking for answers in the documentation, because it exists and is probably a better source.
You just
90%
killed YouTube,
of the time.
by the way. I'm just saying.
I know, but YouTube
I'm
has
closing
been
my
such an
channel right
awful
this
source
second.
for these things for so long. Sometimes you come across good stuff, but like a video just automatically becomes. You guys were talking about how documentation effectively like bit rots in the wild. Like it just doesn't get updated enough. Videos have the worst case of that.
Same problem. That's true. Just on that topic, I think that the problem there is that people see like Technotim in his gigantic server rack, and have the idea that that's the only way of doing things and stuff like that. But that's not a home lab specific thing. I think you can take that back to Linux as well. People see me do weird things on window manager, just think, oh, is that like what Windows or what Linux is like? I have to use this thing called Hyperland. What's that? And why is he opening all these terminals? Like, why are all the terminals being opened? Like, it's just people see things on the video and they assume that that's the way that it is for everyone, and it can ruin things. But also, as a YouTuber, you should definitely watch my videos. Leave a thumbs up, please, guys. Storm, go ahead.
What's it? With education and stuff like that, the distro thing shouldn't really be an issue. I mean, America it might be because y'all don't standardize. But the whole point of a school board is to be a body of standardization, and y'all usually do it kind of by state, but it also gets done by like township as well in a really awkward and weird way. And so it's fractured. And so there's an innate issue with the school system. But if we're going to integrate Linux for education, a corporation is not going to be good enough. That's kind of the problem at the moment. Windows and Google do not give a fuck. Like they're the support services and they're shit support. The tech is just kind of dumped on them, and it's like, well, just use it. And so that's why like tech support at schools are also always stressed out because they're just having to keep up with Windows breaking all the time or with Google breaking all the time. We need a state mandated body that develops these things where it is someone's job paid by the state to teach people these things rather than relying on some phantom corporation to come out of nowhere and fix all the problems. Institutional changes need to happen for Linux to be integrated into the education system properly, and to fix the problem with education that causes money to hemorrhage, because tech is one of the most expensive parts of education, and education is overspent at the moment. And so a lot of situations needs to be dealt with in that regard.
Nate, go ahead.
Well, I will say also, people don't realize too that the United States is not just one country. It's actually each state's its own country, so that creates issues within itself. Anyways, I will also say that piggyback off of what RBM was saying, I also feel like too that if we really want to convince people that Linux is good, we need to stop. And I'm going to say this towards YouTubers, Matt, and I'm not calling you out in particular. Okay, I'm just saying as YouTubers, one of the biggest problems we have is we'll say, "Oh, just YouTube it," but you run across like 50 videos of these people that don't break it down enough to where new users can understand. If that makes sense, you have a lot of people like, "Oh, we'll do this, 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 and this," but they don't actually take the time and say, "Okay, this is the reason why we need to do this." And one thing I will comment that the Linux Cast, aka Matt, does is he will straight up tell you, "I don't know why it works, but it does. So if you follow me, hopefully it works."
Don't
And
ask me to
that's
explain it. I don't know.
well, but that's the thing though. Like you admit it, and that's the biggest thing. And I feel like that is what people need to work on, especially in their videos. Like for example, I'm trying to learn how to code, but Lord help me, some of these people they think that you've been using Vim for 50 million years. And just like, oh, do this, this, this. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, stop. What was the hotkey that you just hit out of nowhere? Okay, like break it down to me.
You shouldn't watch the Primogen as code tutorials, is what you're saying to say. Okay, like you just should not do that. I've been using Vim for 7 years now, and he makes me look like a complete noob when it comes to Vim, and that's saying something. Drew, go ahead.
Just to piggyback on what Nate was saying, I appreciate you saying that, because one thing that D-Dubs has told me repeatedly is that when I do a video, I should have some type of show note in order to, so because if I'm following a specific process, for example, and I do it sometimes, but I don't do it all the time, and maybe that was just that kind of that kind of comment hopefully will like propel me into doing something more, I don't know, documented as well as video. So two different types of resources so that you can like, so that people who are trying to learn something or trying to follow a specific process can follow along in two different ways. So that was the only thing I was going to say. Thank you for saying that, because I think that was my one takeaway.
I have these grand plans of always doing a blog post alongside every video that I do. It hasn't happened yet. Now, Chris Titus Tech does this. Like every video he does, like at least the technical ones, they have a blog post to go along with them, and that's the kind of dedication you need in order to get 300,000 subscribers, I guess. Des, go ahead.
I've been using Vim for quite a while too, since my first Linux server, but I need to learn it better, and I'm gonna have to like listen to DistroTube, another YouTuber as well, to really learn it better at some point pretty soon. But believe it or not, Nano, that's supposed to be easier. I don't know Nano very well at all.
Yeah, those key bindings can be, pretty weird. Micro has way better key bindings out of the box, I think. If you're going to use a non-Vim text editor, Micro is definitely the way to go. RBM, go ahead.
I know you guys have all run across, or you probably even have your own set of like top 5 things to do after fresh installing a Linux distro. Your main apps that you got to set up and all of that. Bar none, the most important thing to do after you fresh install a distro is install a plain markdown editor and start taking notes. Do not proceed without a note about what you are about to proceed to do. Make a note, then do the thing. And if you stick to that for 2 hours, you will make more progress than you could make in a week skipping it.
Totally agree. Nate, go ahead.
Hey, I was just looking out for you. I just want to know. I know it's like over 10 o'clock your time, so I was just trying to see how much longer you wanted to go with this.
Another 10 minutes.
Another 10 minutes. Okay.
Yep.
I will also say a micro is better than nano, by the way.
I think that's true. So I used Nano for 30 days as a challenge, and it's not bad, but it requires some configuration if you want it to be good. And I think that micro solves a lot of the problems that Nano has out of the box, but without you having to deal with any of them. Add in it has way superior mouse support, and the key bindings are just better. Overall, micro is just a better text editor. The thing about the whole, so just my last hot take is that Vim users are the ultimate elitists, like, and that's just the truth. Like they beat out NixOS and Arch by far. The only other group that really comes closer are the Emacs guys, and they're like kind of on equal plane.
I was going to say Emacs, dude.
Like Emacs and Vim, they're kind of like up there. Like they're the prime elitists, and part of that is that I think that the harder something is to learn, the more elitists congregate around it. So, and that's not always the case, but at least in this case, I do think that's the reason why. Like Vim, it takes a long time to get to know how to do, and if you put that kind of effort in, you're gonna be kind of proud of it, and you're gonna tell everybody that they should do it too, because that's just the way that it is. Tyler, go ahead.
Oh, thank God. So, as a NeoVim person who is maybe in the elitist category, felt like I was drowning there for a second. So, if anyone needs a NeoVim config personalized walkthrough, I said it in the chat, just hit me up in Discord. Trust me, I can change your life, okay? NeoVim, give it 45 minutes of configuration, and I swear to God, it will be the best text editor you've ever used. It will not only look good exactly the way you want it to, also, a lot of people don't know the plugin system and like which plugins to use. It's okay. everybody's got different configs, but anyone can hand you theirs and explain in 15 minutes what the different keybinds are. You can search through files based on keywords through any directory structure. You can search for file names, use it that way, create, manage, and add all of your stuff and have it actually look like a GUI would, but not actually have to click everywhere. Also, you can make it where you can click everywhere and still have all your options. So there is no reason not to use NeoVim. It's awesome. And no, I am not paid by them for this advertisement. I should be, though.
Well done. Well done. Storm, go ahead.
What's it? I imagine your before I say what I'm gonna say, I imagine your name on Discord is the same as you want here, because I might take you up on that NeoVim offer.
Same. I'll give it a shot.
Tyler's
Yeah.
gonna have a whole
We'll have a
NeoVim
group class. All right.
Oh yeah, no, that would be
There we
pretty
go.
sick. What I would say is the elitism problem. Do you know what, Zany? The way you're approaching it, I don't know whether I'd call you an elitist. You are way too respectful and nice and inviting and like wanting to help people. You know, like elitism is like really chauvinistic. It's like telling people that not only they should do it, they got to figure it out themselves, and it's superior to everything and dominating. You're really showing that, like, oh, it's hard. It's not the greatest to get into, but like I can help you get into it, and then once you're into it, it's wonderful. And that is like explaining the odds, looking at how it gets into, and being really fucking respectful about it. The problem with elitism is it's like the Arch community is terrible for this. You not only have you got to do it, fucking figure it out yourself, motherfucker. And then if you do get help, you get spoken to like you're an actual idiot. Like you don't know anything. Like why don't you understand this? This is obviously the best thing ever. And it is just like wow. Like even with how complicated Gen 2 is, I don't even get that from the Gen 2 community. And they've got their own elitists. Their elitists are bad. But like Arch has like got the most, I feel like. They're like a congregate. It's almost like a stereotype at this point. Arch isn't even the most advanced form of Linux. Like I'm gonna fucking puncture their hearts right there. But what's it? Yeah, elitism is a massive issue because you don't need to be an elitist to be proud of yourself. It's good to be proud of yourself. You did something fucking great. It's like really important for people to be able to show their pride that they did something good. But that pride needs to come in due respect, so that it's not because someone's some special like snowflake that they got something. It's that we're all meat fleshy stuff that learn stuff, and you put the effort in and you learn it, and you can help other people learn it, and other people have different skills. You know, if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, everyone is fucking stupid. Like everyone's intelligent. That's what Dr. Einstein said. You know, it's a really important facet for people to consider.
GNU to Linux. Go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Okay. How about that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. I just wanted to thank you for the group. I don't really have anything relevant to say. I just wanted to make sure my microphone worked on my ancient laptop here with Linux Mint. And looks like my camera works too, but I'm kind of in the dark. But other than that, hopefully next time I'll have something relevant to add. So thank you.
Welcome. Also, you need a better distro. Just kidding. Just kidding. I said that just to piss
Come
you
on,
off.
it loses the ability to criticize Linux Mint. I'm sorry.
It's a useless.
There is no distro that he actually likes, just so everybody knows that. Okay, nothing is good enough for Matt. Let's just accept that.
OpenSUSE is the best. Zipper is fast.
Yeah.
RPM, go ahead.
On the matter of elitism, I may have you beat if you don't mind me coming by to watch your NeoVim demonstration so that I can chuckle loudly to myself about how much cooler mine is.
Did you name
A
yours
true NeoVim user.
NV
True NeoVim user.
NV Chad, by the way. Nate, go ahead.
Oh, I just come up with a brilliant idea, Matt, for you to stop picking on Zany about not uploading to YouTube. Maybe Zany needs to change it to Zany NeoVim School. And then every Monday night, upload a video to YouTube that's about an hour and a half long, and just do NeoVim teaching. And so maybe when y'all do the podcast on Tuesdays, Zanny could be like, well, I actually did something in Linux.
Sorry, you'd have to remember this password in order to do that.
If it's an hour or 2 hour long, like, let's be clear, most of that is just going to be me trying to tell someone like two keybinds that do something. The rest is just going to be conversation about nothing important or relevant at all. I know myself too well. That's exactly
Yeah,
what it's going to
be
be.
30 minutes trying to find the ladder.
That's what we need, though. Like, I love that. Like, you know, because it might be relevant to something else. It just might not be relevant to the video. I love videos that kind of just autism out. You know, it's one of the things I love about Cathode Ray Dude's videos is the rabbit holes the guy gets into.
We all know exactly what would happen if this mythical usage of YouTube ever came about on Zany's channel. He would do the school thing for all 15 minutes, and then I would come back 5 minutes later, and DT and him and a whole bunch of other guys would be there with 0 AD just playing games. like this doesn't look like Vim, Tyler. Doesn't look like Vim. It looks like 0 AD. Okay. Arch Penguin, you're gonna lead us out to the end. What you got?
Yeah, I just wanted to second the thanking for this Linux user group. It's getting better every time. Really think we've come a long way, and it's turned into a really great thing, man. And the other thing I want to touch on is, hey, not all Arch users are elitist assholes, so you know.
I know, no hate to like all Arch users. You just know that there is a big problem. Like, I don't think Arch is like some horrible thing, and that there isn't good Arch users.
A lot of that comes from Reddit and the whole "I use Arch, by the way," and it just becomes a snowball of crap. And
the urinal meme. Have you seen that one where it's like he like walks all the way up to piss next to him, and he goes, "I use Arch, by the way."
Yeah, I don't really care for that saying at all. I don't know.
And we all know they're still using Windows, even though they say they use Arch, by the way.
Yeah, half of those are just those are just kids. Half of them just making other Arch users look bad.
Yeah, Arch virtual machine.
All right, I've lost. I've officially lost control. The Arch users have come in to take over. All right, so that is it for this lug. Just let you know if you're watching live, we do this twice every month. The first one is in the morning. It's the second Thursday of the month. We do it at 11:15 Eastern time. The link will stay the same from now on, I believe. And then the second one is in the evenings, which is obviously this one. It's the fourth Thursday of the month. So if you want to join, the best way to know it's going to happen is True. Thank you, True. Anyways, the best way to know it's going to happen is to join the Discord server. That's where all the notifications and stuff will come in to let you know what the topic is going to be and when it's actually going to happen. And then you can also just catch the VOD, because this will stay up in perpetuity. I'm not going to force Nate to edit it. That would be the ultimate revenge, is to have him go through and try to edit all of the audio that just came out of this stuff. That'd be horrible. But if you can't catch it live, you can always go through and watch it on YouTube afterwards, as well as Odyssey. By the way, just to let everybody know, because I've gotten this question multiple times, PureTube is broken. It no longer has YouTube Sync in the vast majority of instances. So TIL vids, which is what I used, their YouTube Sync is just broken. So if you get the Linux Cast stuff on TIL vids, it's no longer going to happen, because I'm much too lazy to actually upload there on my own. So that is it for this one. Again, I hope everyone's... Oh, one last thing. Thank you, Drew, for setting up the Jitsi instance. Once again, this worked awesome. It worked so good. Yep. So thank you, Drew. Anyways.
Yeah, definitely thanks to Drew. Thank you, Drew.
Yep. Worked very well. Anyways, we'll see you guys next time.
Cheers.
Take care.
Matt.
Bye.
Bye.
Matt.
See ya.
Plug Drew's channel. Just to
So,
go